For a long time, I was just like, why can you make clothes for every other quote unquote special size, but not for me?
Hi, I'm Grasie Mercedes, and welcome back to Not Blank Enough, a podcast about everyday insecurities and triumphs. In this episode, I'm talking with Gabi Gregg, aka Gabi Fresh. The biracial influencer, entrepreneur, and fashion designer talks about her ADHD, the plus-size fashion and influencer space, and transitioning into a new career. I hope you enjoy this insightful conversation we titled Not Thin Enough. Well, hi, Gabi. Welcome to Not Blank Enough.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. I haven't seen you in so long.
I know, it's been a while. Also, I haven't seen anyone in the last year, so there's that.
Well, yeah, that is true. I think the last time we saw each other is when we shot the natural hair video that we did.
Oh my gosh, that was so fun.
That was so fun, and like a couple of years ago now.
I know. I cut my hair completely off. I don't know if you can tell.
I can see. It's so cute.
Like a couple months ago. So definitely a transition.
What made you do that?
I don't know. A lot of things. One, I think quarantine, right? I think we all get a little bit impulsive and bored. But also I think I just was so sick of it and just ready for a kind of new moment. Not to be super cliche, but
yeah,
I think I just wanted a refresh, clean slate.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. I've gotten braids twice now in quarantine.
Amazing.
I've never had braids in my life, so I get it. So let's go back to the very beginning. I need to know the beginnings of Gabi. Where were you born? Where were you raised? Tell me a little bit about your upbringing.
I was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. So I'm definitely a Midwest girl through and through. I grew up with my mom on the east side of Detroit and my older sisters. And I went to Detroit public schools for the first 11 years of my life. And then I transferred to a suburban, private, super white, rich school, which was definitely a culture shock for me.
I bet.
And so that was definitely, I feel like, one of those moments in life that's just very memorable. And one of the things that was just a really hard time. I was in 7th grade, which is already a tough time for young girls, right? So there was that. And I stayed at that school through high school, but I became a boarder in high school. So basically, I lived at the school for 4 years and then went to college in Massachusetts.
Okay. Whoa. Okay. Back up. What was that like? So the school that was the culture shock for you was also your boarding school?
Correct. Yeah. But they don't offer boardings. They don't offer boarding to middle schoolers. It's a K through 12.
Oh, got it.
And boarding starts in high school, but not required. So a small percentage of students are boarders. And I became one just for a few reasons, mostly because my mom was a single mom and she was driving me daily to school, which was an hour commute with traffic each way.
Oh, no.
And she was a school teacher in Detroit. So we would wake up at 5 a.m., get ready, drive me to school, and then drive all the way back to school for her to be on time to teach her school all day. And then the same thing after school. And she was just I can't do this for 4 more years, understandably. So that was pretty much why I made that choice.
And what was that like? What was boarding school like? I feel like the only thing I know of boarding school is what you see on TV. I've never met a person who went to boarding school.
I mean, the TV depictions are kind of accurate. I think it definitely depends. There's a bunch of different kinds. I feel super grateful that my school definitely played into some of the stereotypes of rich white kid schools for sure. And I definitely felt othered in a lot of ways. But on the other hand, most of the boarding students were either inner city kids or international students. So we had a ton of diversity, a lot of students from overseas. And I think in high school is when I finally did start to feel a little bit more comfortable in my skin because I was finally surrounded by more Black kids and more kids of color, whereas in middle school, I was not.
Oh, interesting. So your middle school was in Detroit.
So my elementary school is in Detroit.
Oh, got it.
And I went there through 6th grade. I transferred from the Detroit public school after 6th grade into 7th and 8th grade middle school at Cranbrook, which is the suburban private school. And those 2 years were really tough. I mean, they weren't horrible. I wasn't bullied or anything, but I was just one of few Black kids in my grade and in the school at all. And I was in a school before that where I was one of the smartest students. I was pretty popular and all of those things to go to being a new kid who is chubby, who is Black, who was relatively poor. I wasn't poor, but in comparison to these kids whose parents had private jets, that was like wealth that I had never encountered, let alone I really didn't even know existed, let alone encountered like in a personal way. So it was just a completely othering experience. And then again, that kind of continued through high school, but at least in high school, there were so many more students who transferred into Cranbrook. And so at that point, I started to feel a little bit more myself. I was able to make other friends, join different, what are those called? I don't even like extracurricular
like
clubs,
groups,
right?
Yeah.
And so like I was in like African American Awareness Association and Diversity Club, and like to Cranbrook's, again, to their credit, they are super focused on diversity in a big way there. And so even though this was at the time like early 2000s, I was like in Gay Straight Alliance. I was on the board of Diversity Club, like all of these things that they were really passionate about and I was passionate about. So I feel lucky in that way. And again, I wasn't bullied per se, but I was just felt different, And so I'm lucky that I guess that kind of softened a little bit through high school.
Yeah. And before high school, before you got to that point, what was that feeling of not enoughness? Like, what was the big one that hit you the hardest, you think?
It's so funny because I thought about this before we started recording, and it's just like interesting because I feel like I could fill that blank, right, with almost any word.
Right.
I think the obvious one, of course, having made a career out of being a plus size influencer is like not thin enough or not skinny enough. And that was definitely a part of my story and has been a part of my story for sure. It's the thing I'm probably most well known for. But of course, in that moment, in that time in my life, I definitely didn't feel white enough. I didn't feel rich enough. I didn't feel pretty enough. I didn't feel smart enough. I was so used to being at the top of my class and then to go into a school where I was behind because I hadn't learned the same things they had learned. And I didn't understand algebra, and so all of those things where I wasn't on the AP track, and so I didn't feel smart enough either. So there were just like so many things at the same time that were occurring in my life for the first time. And so that blank could be filled with a million different things.
And then once you got to your boarding school, which I love that it's kind of the opposite of what you would think, like, because you had these other diverse people around. So you did start to feel a little more, comfortable in your own skin. So tell me a little more about that experience and who you were hanging out with and what kind of life you had back then.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I consider especially the early years of boarding school, so like 9th and 10th grade were some of the best years of my life. I mean, you're basically at sleepaway camp, right? So like you're surrounded by other teenagers with no parents and like sneaking into each other's rooms and just like telling secrets and like you're away from your...
Was it co-ed?
So the school is co-ed, but there's a large campus. It's kind of like a college campus. So the boys were on a separate part of campus about like a 15-minute walk away,
Okay.
So there was there. I mean, of course, there were some people who broke the rules and like snuck guys into their rooms and stuff, but it actually wasn't as prevalent as you would think. It was pretty much like me and my girlfriends would hang out and sneak into each other's rooms because technically we had curfew and we would just wait for the adults to go to sleep and then like run to each other's rooms at night,
Yeah. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it was really, really, really fun. I mean, and I was pretty a good kid. Like I didn't break a lot of rules and stuff like that. And so it wasn't kind of this stereotypical like coke-addled like gossip girl situation. It was really kind of pure and innocent and just like this coming of age time where everybody was just excited to be away from our parents and hang out with each other.
Nice. And then from there, did you go to college?
Yeah, so that was my first time leaving. I mean, again, I went to boarding school, so that kind of counts, but it was in the same vicinity of home.
Right.
So I went to college in Western Massachusetts at an all-women's school called Mount Holyoke.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so that, again, was another big life transition just because it was away from home for the first time in a big way. But it was a little bit easier for me than other people because I had been away from my parents, again, for so long. And my high school was a college prep school, so I felt extremely prepared, if not over-prepared for college. And I think I had gone through that scary transition in 7th grade that a lot of people end up feeling, when they leave and go to college. So college was fun, but also when I feel like was the first onset of my mental illness. So I really struggled with depression and anxiety, among other things, ADHD. And that was the first time those really got a hold of me in a big way. And so that was kind of my college experience, I think, was very colored by how much I struggled mentally.
Did you get diagnosed in college?
I actually don't know if I got an official diagnosis. It was my first time seeing therapists. So my college had on-campus therapists that I would go talk to, but it was just really hard. Like I felt so alone and lonely. And I was struggling in a big way because for the first time I didn't have structure. So even though I went to a boarding school in high school, it was still school, right? Like I still had to wake up at a certain time. I still had to be in class. And like college, you don't have to be in class, right? They might take attendance, but they don't really care if you're there or not. And so it's on you. And so that's when like all of these things kind of caught up with me in a way. Like I always had ADHD since I was born. I was really unorganized and had a hard time with keeping myself on a schedule, but because I had structure around me, I kind of was able to deal with it. And so when you took that structure away and it was up to me to like make sure I got to class on time, make sure I was consistent with studying and keeping up with homework and all of those things, it kind of fell apart, right? And so that was, I think, the big transition for me there.
That's so interesting. I do remember, I'll never forget when I was signing up for classes for college for the first time being like, so wait a second, I only have class like for 4 hours on Tuesday and for 4 hours on Thursday. And what do I do the other 5 days a week?
What do I do with the rest of my time?
Right.
And also like I'm one of those optimistic ADHD people, which means like I have the best intentions. I'm like, oh, I'm really tired right now, so I won't go this week, but I'll make sure I do my work and catch up and like I'll be there next week. And then somehow, some way, it's finals and I'm not ready, and I'm trying to cram the night before.
And what did you go to school for? Like, what did you think you wanted to do?
I was really interested in fashion for sure,
cool.
in a real way, but one, didn't feel like that was realistic because I had no context for what that looked like, how to do it. And then my school also didn't offer anything in that realm whatsoever. It was a small liberal arts school. So I liked the idea of fashion journalism, and this is crazy, but I was like, well, what if I go to school to become a journalist and then make my way over to fashion in that way? But my school didn't even offer journalism. One thing I realized when I was reading through just like college materials was that a lot of people ended up in journalism who majored in international relations. They became political journalists. And so I had some interest in politics, and I thought, and there was a part of me, I think like many 19-year-olds and 18-year-olds who were like, maybe I could be a lawyer. It just feels like a safe, like you just know how to get there, right? Like you know the steps to become a lawyer.
Yeah.
And so international relations majors also often went on to law school. And so long story short is I ended up majoring in international relations, which is basically history, economics, and politics. And I minored in African American studies.
Oh, cool. So real quick, like going back to the theme of the show, in college, were there ever feelings of not blank enough? Like, how was your college experience?
Man, college was such a weird and nuanced time. I don't really know how to explain it in a lot of ways. I think I was just honestly not ready for it. Like I I know that goes against what I said earlier about being super prepared. And I was prepared like in a very literal sense. Like I was okay with being away from home. I was prepared from an academic standpoint. Like my first semester at college, I think I got a 4.0 for the first time in my life.
Amazing.
Just because my high school was so hard and so like serious about academics that I did really well in college. But just from a like maturity standpoint, I don't think I was ready. I think I needed more time to figure out what I wanted in life, what I wanted to do. And so I was really just thrown in and just confused. But that being said, I think was immature from a social standpoint. My mom really encouraged me to apply to Mount Holyoke, which is an all-women's college. And I ended up liking it when I visited, surprisingly. But when I got there, I was just like, where are the boys? Where are the parties? Like, I had so clung on to that media idea of like what college is supposed to look like.
Yeah.
And like, I wanted to go to all the raging frat parties with red cups. And we didn't have that. And we were in this small, tiny little town. And I was like, we weren't in Boston or New York City. It was like Western Mass is very different. So it's like pretty quiet, kind of in the middle of nowhere.
I know where Holyoke is. My husband's from Longmeadow.
Oh my God.
Which is like right there. There's nothing over there.
That's basically. So there's a 5-college consortium, which is nice. So in addition to Mount Holyoke, there's Smith College, which is all women's. There's Amherst College. There's UMass.
Right.
There's Hampshire, which I know they were on the brink of closure, so I don't know what's going on with that school. But there were other colleges in the area that were co-ed as well. And so there was that, which helped. But for the most part, you're just very far away from like anything, which I was not used to coming from a metropolitan area.
Yeah, for sure. And then even going to an all-girls college. I mean, I went to an all-girls Catholic high school.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always tell people, like, don't send your kids to all-girls high schools because, at least in my experience growing up in New York City, because we didn't have boys our age around, like I was meeting boys in real life and they were not boys. They ended up being men because you're meeting them like out and about instead of meeting them in school.
In a safe place. Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's so funny. I've always said this in different interviews, but I feel really grateful I went there in retrospect, right? Because I feel like I remember going to summer school at one point to University of Michigan, where I'm from. I went to a summer class there. And I was so caught off guard because we were taking sociology and the teacher would ask questions and only the boys would talk. None of the girls would talk.
Oh, wow.
But here I was, like, I was raising my hand and talking actively. And I realized, like, I looked around and I was like, I am literally the only woman in this class who's speaking up. And that's when it, like, something just clicked in my head where I was like, oh, like, it's so different. And I totally get why it's necessary, or at least not necessarily, but good to be surrounded by women who all have voices. Like, I'm coming from a school where almost so many of the professors are women. Obviously all of my classmates are women. And I'm just used to seeing women in leadership and women speaking up. And so to then go to another school where only the guys were talking and none of the girls felt comfortable talking, that was like a really big realization for me.
That is a good point because, yeah, on the flip side of going to all girls Catholic high school, you didn't have to worry about boys. Like, you don't have to worry about boys, and as far as liking boys, and as far as boy drama, as far as, like, I feel like in high school, you're concerned whether someone thinks you're too smart or too dumb, like whatever those things are. You don't have any of that.
Completely, at least not really in the classroom. And again, we had the option of taking classes off campus and vice versa. So once in a while, we would have a couple guys in our classes from a different school, but it never felt like they were in the way of our learning or of our desire to speak up, et cetera. So I feel really grateful for that experience. And I also I know I came out of it on the other end, much more mature, much more sure of myself.
But during, you maybe felt like not mature enough, like you weren't quite ready for the experience.
Yeah, or I just felt, I don't think I felt not ready for it in the moment, but I just felt uncomfortable in the moment and wished I wanted to transfer out. I didn't like it. And again, like, my mom was like, no, you're staying there. She was like, I'm not letting you leave. And so in some ways I was resentful, of course, as like a 19-year-old, because I wanted to leave and transfer to NYU. I was like,
that's where I went.
Oh my God. See, I was like, I want to be around boys. I want to be around the city. I want to be around fashion. And like, to some degree, I think that's valid. Like, I do feel like I would have thrived in some ways having that experience and really pursuing fashion early on. But that being said, I think there was so much value in going to such a strong place for college. And it was such an academically rigorous experience as well. So I don't know, no regrets, like, I think I went there for a reason. I made some lifelong friends. And it was just like a beautiful and really enriching experience. And I came out the other end super feminist. So I can't be mad at it.
Well, that's a great thing to leave with. And so now, adult Gabi, tell me about what you do now and how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, I am an influencer, which I still don't love that word.
I hate that word.
But it's the easiest. It's the easiest word. Like, it's the most understood word to describe what I do, Yeah,
no, totally. I just remember when people started calling bloggers influencers, I was still blogging. I
hated it.
And I just hated it. I was like, what? That's such a gross word.
It felt like such, and I think it feels this way because it is, but it felt like such a corporate term. Like, it felt like these marketers were like, calling us this word internally, and then somehow it became a mainstream thing. But like, it's just gross I think it's really gross to call yourself that.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, it feels funny and weird, but I can't really call myself a blogger anymore because I actually literally don't blog. So there's no real other word for it. I sometimes call myself like a designer, which is true. But I think I wear so many hats that influencer is the easiest one to kind of throw out there.
You could also be considered an entrepreneur, content creator, all those things. But yeah, I totally get it. Influencer is kind of, people know what that means,
Right.
People know what that means.
Yeah. So I started in 2008, like right after I graduated college. So I was one of the first plus size style bloggers and an influencer before that word really existed. My goal with my blog was in no way career oriented. I wasn't trying to make it a thing. I didn't know that was even a possibility back then. It truly just came from a place of wanting to create a resource for other plus size women because I didn't see one that existed. I felt really frustrated with the lack of fashion options. I felt really frustrated with the lack of visibility and representation. And I thought, especially when it came to the fashion conversation, there just was nothing for us. And anything that did exist for us was all about how to look smaller. It was more aimed at like moms in their 40s about like, oh, how to dress after you have kids and like your body's changing versus just like, no, I'm young and I want to dress the same as my peers and I don't have those options available to me. What can I do? Where can I go?
Yeah.
And so that was really why I started. And because it was one of the first, I am lucky enough to have really created a lane for plus size fashion influencers. And my career has been pretty great because of that. Obviously now body positivity and all of these things are kind of like mainstream understood terms and like topics that everyone's talking about. But 11, 12 years ago, they were not, and so my blog spread pretty quickly in its niche because it was one of the few that existed. And I think because of that, I've enjoyed like a really great career with some great opportunities.
Yeah, I've had JC Dupree on here before, JC, and we talked about that because I also started blogging in 2008, and we were a small crew. There was maybe, I don't know, 20, maybe 40 girls between New York and LA who were doing it, and no one was doing it for money because we couldn't make money then. Yeah, that wasn't a thing. So it was so cool because I feel like a lot of those women are still doing it in some way, shape, or form. Brands have expanded and people who have their own lines now and their own products. But it's so cool to see everyone and where their journey has taken them, because we really were the OG bloggers before bloggers were even like a thing. And now people get into it to make money. And so it's so like...
It's a very different world.
I don't know. It's so transparent now. Yeah, for sure. And it seems very formulaic now, whereas back then I think like everyone had their own little thing going on. It was really cool to see and be a part of.
Yeah, I think it's changed a lot. I think it's changed in some good ways and some not so good ways. I do miss the community from... I think no one's at fault. It's just like truly when money comes into the picture, things unfortunately just change. They just do. Yeah, it becomes a little bit more competitive. People get a little bit less likely to share your stuff because they want to share their stuff and they want they want the brand deal. And then when you do start getting brand deals, people start side-eyeing you and they're like, why'd she get it? Why? And that whole thing gets weird.
It did spiral pretty quickly.
It really did.
It went from like, oh, we are all doing this really cool thing to like, oh my God, I'm in high school. What?
Do you remember blog rolls?
Oh,
so on
my
the side
God,
of everyone's blog,
yes.
you would link to your favorite blogs and like everything. And then one day there were none.
No blog rolls.
Everyone took them off. It just became weird, man.
Oh my God, that is such a good point. I totally remember that. I totally had my blog roll. Oh my God. Yeah, that's kind of when I eventually bowed out because, well, one, I had other things that I wanted to focus on more, my acting, my directing, my writing, but also just because, it was starting to feel icky at times where I was just like, I don't know if I want to feel like I'm in high school again.
I know. It's so weird. And I never did. The thing is, I don't know. I didn't feel that way. And like, I didn't feel competitive, but it's easy for me to say that because I, in my niche, was kind of the most well-known.
Yeah.
And so I never felt like I don't know. I never felt like competitive, but I did feel it kind of coming at me.
At you,
if that makes sense.
Totally.
But then the funny thing is, in my niche, I felt like that. But then in the broader scheme of things, I would go to these other events and feel completely left out and feel completely different and other again, kind of like I did in middle school and high school because I still was a Black girl. I was still one of the only Black girls blogging, skinny or fat.
Yeah.
And I was broke, especially in the beginning. I was like wearing Forever 21 around all of these bloggers who are wearing, high-end things. And again, I wasn't skinny. And so it kind of recreated that 7th grade feeling of just like, oh, I'm not enough.
Yeah. No, I totally relate. I mean, I know I didn't feel not thin enough, but I definitely felt like, one, there weren't a lot of Black girls, Latin girls, anything other than white. And interesting enough, a lot of Asian girls in blogging. It's you can't say it's not diverse because there are like women of color. They just were never really Black women and not very many Latin women. And then the same thing. I always just wore chain clothing. Like everything I wore was Forever 21, H&M, Zara. And then everyone else was like with their Chanel bags and this and that. I was like, ooh, I don't belong here.
Were you in LA or New York or somewhere else?
I was in LA when I started doing this.
Okay.
I've been in LA for a long time. I went back to New York for a year just because Damien and I were like long distance for a little while and he was still working in New York.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was full on blogging, it started right when we came back from New York. So yeah, like 2008, 2009.
That makes sense. Because I'm like, I never saw you around, but I did go to events more so in the first couple years. And then I stopped too for that same reason. I was like, why am I going to these places where I don't feel good about myself? Like, what's the point? And I also was lucky enough to continue to get work. Like, I think some influencers, it's really important for them to go to events because they want to be seen and like network with PR and all those things. But like for me, I was getting work without that element. And I was just like, why am I surrounding myself with these people who don't make me feel good? And I didn't really find a reason. So like all of the friends I've made through blogging have mostly been online because in person, I just never felt comfortable.
No, I totally get it. And I didn't go to a lot of events either for that same reason, where I was just like, it didn't feel good. But moving away from the negative aspects of blogging and moving towards, I mean, what you did is truly like amazing. Like I see your brand, I'm just like, oh my God, it's so cool. And when you came out with your swim line and you came out with your clothing line, you know, it's true. It's the first time I've ever seen cool looking plus size clothing, like clothes I want to wear. I was almost the reverse. I'm like, well, I can't wear that because I don't have my size. But it was just like, this is the first time I've ever thought that. Like you never think that about the average plus size clothing you see out in the world.
Completely. Thank you. So I started, my first big brand collab was with swimwear. I was sharing my outfits and one day shared a bikini photo, which it was really hard for me to even find a bikini. They almost didn't exist, but I like searched and finally found this one kind of rare website. And they had one brand that offered a size 18 and that was the biggest size they had. And that was my size. And so I ordered it. And people just went kind of crazy because they were like, oh my God, where did you get this? I've never seen bikinis in my size. And so it kind of went viral. And I was approached the next year by an online brand called Swimsuits for All and asked if I wanted to do like a one-time collab. To everyone's surprise, it sold out immediately, kind of crashed the website, and that went viral. And so since then, we've been working together, and it's been like I think it's the longest running, I want to say it's the longest running influencer collab that I know of.
Yeah.
So it's been like 8 years since that started.
That's incredible. Holy cow.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And then since then, of course, now you can go into any plus size category in any store and see bikinis, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
But that literally didn't exist like before that.
Yeah. And then you did also a clothing line, right?
Yeah. So Prem is a clothing line I launched with my longtime friend, Nicolette Mason, who is another plus size influencer, writer, consultant, amazing human. And long story short is we did really well. We were super successful. We had a ton of press, but for whatever reason that you can think of, we did not get funded, even though we went out to get funded. So we closed last year, which sucks because I really, truly believe that if we were funded, we could have been huge. And there were so many reasons that it would have worked. But being in rooms of a lot of white men trying to convince them why this was an important thing, it didn't quite make sense to them. So that sucks, but it's not surprising. And then you just see another brand of like pens pop up and you're just like, why are these fucking dumb ass companies getting funded? Like it makes no sense.
That's so frustrating, especially because everything was so great. And I think what has happened over the last few years, and I'm sure you guys influenced that, is now like more mainstream brands are carrying bigger sizes.
Yeah, which is super important and really great. Like we are definitely seeing more and more brands extend their size ranges. And like it's almost, I feel like now if you're coming out in 2020 with a brand and you don't have plus, I feel like, what are you doing? You know, like the majority of women are over a size 10 and like the average woman is a size 18. And so if you stop at a size 14, you're literally excluding every like average woman. So it doesn't make any sense from an ethical and moral standpoint, and also not from, in my opinion, a financial standpoint. But luckily, like you said, we are seeing more and more brands start to expand. And I hope that becomes the norm because like for me, because of coronavirus, I probably wouldn't go to a mall right now. But if I were to go to a mall right now, I literally couldn't buy clothing at more than like one or two stores. Yeah. Like there's a couple stores that carry my size now, thankfully, but like that shouldn't be the case. Like I'm not some anomaly that like if I get a last minute event invite, like I'm screwed, you know? Like it just I literally can't go find an outfit.
That's so it's like frustrating and fucked up. And of course, my ignorance, because I've never had that issue. Like I never even thought of that. The fact that like, you can't just go run out and buy something the way.
No. It's truly nuts. And the worst is like a red carpet event or something. It's just like, good luck. And I feel for like all the plus size celebrities and like literally they'll DM me. They're like, where can I go? Do you know any designers that can make me a last minute dress? I have an event in a week and I can't find anything. Yeah. High-end designers don't want to dress them. And then it's not like they can like run into a Nordstrom, they might be able to find like a mother of the bride dress, but like nothing that they would feel good in and feel good being photographed in, you know? And so luckily, like I do genuinely think Lizzo has changed things because her rise was so rapid and she's so fucking awesome and so cool and beautiful. Not that it should take that, right? For anyone to see our humanity and desire to be dressed. But like, I really do think she has moved the needle in a real way. And so she was just on the cover of Vogue this month, which is amazing. It just came out. It's actually the October issue. But I think my point is that I think things are moving in the right direction and hopefully we'll start to see more impactful change soon. But it's taken a long time.
It has. And it's kind of ridiculous. And sizing in general, I feel like, as a freaking pretty thin person, like I'm always sometimes shocked at sizing where I'm just like, I can go into a store sometimes and have to wear a large where I'm nowhere near a large.
Yeah.
Like if you look at me and I'm like, if I'm wearing a large, how does someone who comes in here and is like a size 8, 9, 10 or above like feel? Or what are they putting on? And that to me is just crazy. And I don't know why sizing is that way. Like I don't understand why because it's also not consistent. Like you go into one store and like a size 4 is like this, like so tiny. And then you go to another store and a size 4 is fine. And then it's just like, it doesn't make any sense. It's like no consistency with
nothing
sizing.
Makes sense. Like truly nothing makes sense in the world of clothing and sizes. It just like, it's not consistent. It's not understandable from like why do you stop at a size 8? Like I just,
right.
I mean, there's obviously the reason is fat phobia, truly. Like there are genuinely designers who are just like, I don't want fat people in my clothes. Like they will literally say that.
Wow.
Others won't say it, but they'll blame it on something else. And then I do understand some brands and especially smaller brands just literally aren't able to fund like more sizes. But even then it's just like, you're still making priorities and you're still calling the shots and like where you're putting your money. So it's like, why are you choosing, say you can only afford to make 3 or 4 sizes. Why are you choosing to make 0 through 6?
Right.
Like that's still a choice you're making, right?
Yeah.
And why aren't you choosing to make 12 to 16 when that's closer to what your average customer would wear?
And who is a size 0 anyway? Like
I know.
don't understand. Like how small? Sometimes I look at clothing and I'm like, is this for a child? Like it's like
just, I mean, it's the thing is, I don't know. Like, here's the thing. I'm not here to shame any woman. If you're a size 0, that's great. And I have friends who are size 0s and like, it's hard for them sometimes to find clothes too. So that's valid. But I just feel like size 0s aren't discriminated against in the same ways that plus sizes are. So it's like, yeah, you might be called too skinny or it might be hard to find clothes that fit you. But guess what? You can get a size 2 and get it altered. I can't get a size 2 and get that altered to a size 20. Like there's still so much privilege, and not to mention like just the beauty privilege that comes with the assumption of, oh, well, you're thin, so you're beautiful. You're not getting discriminated against by doctors who you go in for a headache and they're telling you it's because you're fat, like all of these things. So yes, I'm not saying it's easy to be a size 0. There are definitely things that come along with that, but the whole world isn't set up to think you're messy, lazy, disgusting, all of the things that go along with.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Obviously, yes. We definitely don't want to body shame anyone, but that is such a good point because not only do size 0s or cater to, and there's things that exist for them, there's also things that exist for like petite women. There's like lines for petite women. There's lines for tall women. There's
maternity.
Like maternity.
That's my thing. It's like, you're cool making a bigger size for someone who's pregnant temporarily, but not a bigger size for someone who's fat. Like you know what I mean? It's like,
that's
there's something there.
Point. Yeah.
When you're open to using more fabric and more whatever, when it's like cute and marketable for, and again, it's changing. So it's less so now, but for a long time, I was just like, why can you make clothes for every other quote unquote special size, but not for me? You know?
That still doesn't explain that why the stuff that does exist for plus size is
hideous,
so bad. Yeah, it's like so bad and like matronly. Like my mom's almost 60 and she definitely has mom bod. And like, I think she's like, I'm not even sure what size she is. If I had to guess, I would say somewhere in like the 14, 16 range.
Yeah.
It's a struggle. Like when we had to find her a dress for my wedding or we had to find her a dress for my sister's wedding, like it's crazy how hard it is. And it's not like my mom is like, and even if she was like even bigger than she is, but it's just like, why is it so hard? And why does the stuff that exists in her size so ugly?
It's
like,
so ugly.
It's so ugly. It's so matronly. It's horrible. And my sister has a similar issue. And it's just like, it's really frustrating and not fair. And so I'm so grateful. And I'm sure all these women are so grateful to what you have done and what people are starting to do. But you're right. It's not happening fast enough and it should have happened a long time ago.
Completely. Yeah. And it's tough. I think, like you said, for a long time, people assumed plus size women were either older
Mm-hmm.
or kind of middle America, doesn't care about fashion and or wants to hide her body, doesn't want to be seen, doesn't want to participate in fashion.
Mm-hmm.
And so they unfortunately designed the most like, either basic things, like super basic things, or just really ugly things. And so
that also goes, though, to the stereotype that we have in this country that I love to talk about and fight against because of my age, is that we have ageism problems here, where we think because you're 40 now,
you don't want style.
Yeah, you have to suddenly be wearing like a brown paper bag every day. Like, it's just, it's really interesting in the idea of like, well, that's not appropriate for your age. And it's like, what the fuck does that mean? Like, I can
Literally,
wear whatever I want. Yeah.
It's so fucked on every level. And I think that's changing a little bit too. Luckily, I'm seeing, and I feel like for a long time, actresses and like kind of celebrities after a certain age kind of disappeared because they didn't have social media. They didn't, the same way that, you know, plus size women were ignored because we didn't have a voice, and social media and the internet has given us that voice to demand change. I think the same goes for celebrities now who own their own image and own their own voice because they have Instagram and Twitter and whatever. And I'm just thinking of like whatever, love or hate her, someone like a Kim Kardashian who's so famous and like isn't going away anytime soon. And we're seeing her age and we're seeing her still be stylish and all of these things. And it's not just her. I understand she's a problematic and like people love to hate her, etc. Right. But regardless of who you are, I feel like so many celebrities are like kind of taking back their agency and able to share images of themselves. Even someone like a Demi Moore, who's like older and like sharing photos, and it's just like, she's so hot. You know what I mean? She's gorgeous and stylish. And like, I just love seeing women who are not 25 still kind of participating in their own story and like taking agency and taking ownership of their image and of the images they're sharing of themselves and all of these things. And so I'm hoping and hopeful that like ageism kind of goes away at some point, or at least feels less stigmatized, and like aging shouldn't feel like this thing we're afraid of. And I will say, like, my point of all this is that watching these women who are older than me continue to kind of kill it in whatever they're doing has made me less afraid of getting older.
Yeah.
Like I just turned 34, and seeing like 45-year-olds fucking killing it either on social media or in entrepreneurship or whatever they're choosing to do is inspiring to me. And I'm like, oh, cool. I don't have to feel like my career is going to end tomorrow because I'm no longer 25.
Yeah. I mean, I'm 42 and I've never lied about my age and I've never hidden my age, but I didn't really like advertise it until I turned 40. And I remember...
I remember you saying that. I was like, what? But not even in an ageist way, not in a bad way. It was just surprising because I think I didn't know.
And that's why I think it's surprising to most people, which is why I felt like I needed to talk about it. Because I feel like, yeah, I'm 40, guys. And guess what? 40 is not that old. Because they think
not old at all.
People, they think like, well, at 40, you should look a certain way and you should have kids and you should be this and you should be that. And I was like, no, or not. Like, I didn't start pursuing things I love until I was 30. I was, pursuing all these other things that I thought I had to pursue because that's how you make money and that's how you buy a house and get married and do all these things that you're quote unquote supposed to do.
Right.
And it wasn't until I was 30, I was like, fuck that. I want to do what I want to do and follow my dreams finally.
Which I love, by the way. And I feel like I find you so inspiring, not because of your age, but just because I think I've said this before in other places, but I'm not 100% happy being just a quote unquote influencer. And there's nothing wrong with that career. And like, I'm not being disparaging because I have a ton of respect for influencers and the work that they put into what they do, but it's not all I want to do with my life. Right. And so and I've always been interested in writing and I've always been interested in directing and all of these things. So to see you do that and make that transition, I'm just like, okay, that's totally doable. It's less scary to me. Like, I'm in screenwriting classes now. I'm like working on a pilot.
Oh, awesome.
And it just feels like I'm also like exploring other brand ideas that I want to do outside of just, collabs. Right. And so I'm just like, there's no ceiling or limit on what our abilities are. And we don't have to feel like we're locked into anything. And I did for a long time, especially I think in some ways because I was successful in this space. It felt almost scarier to start over because I'm like, why would I start over when I have success doing this and I have money and I have whatever? But it's like, but at the end of the day, you have to take the risk. You have to pursue what feels good to you. And so it's exciting to think about other things I can be doing, and to see people like you actually making that transition has been super inspirational.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, that means a lot to me. And It is scary. I mean, I'm not going to lie. There was a height of my blogging where I was making very good money. And I was like, this is amazing. But I also was like, I'm not happy just doing this. And in order to make the money I was making, I had to like be full in on the blogging thing. I mean, that was like the days where I was, shooting at least once a week, posting, 3 blogs a week, posting on Instagram multiple times a day, like just all in, going on, branded vacations and trips. I had to make a decision at a certain point. Like, I'm not going to get rid of this. I'm not going to stop doing this altogether, but I'm not going to devote all my time to it. I'm going to devote less time to it and focus my other time on, acting, writing, being in class, reading books, taking classes, and actually writing. And yeah, of course, I'm making less money as an influencer or as a blogger because I'm putting more efforts into this other thing. But great things are happening over here. So it's like, yeah, you kind of have to give and take until you land where you want to land, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And I think I literally just told my manager the other day, I was like, look, I don't want anything through the rest of the year. I was like, I'm done. I think for lots of reasons, one being because I want to transition into doing other things, 2, because of just the state of the world and like my mental ability to continue to work at full capacity right now. I'm just like, I just need to take a little bit of a breather. I have still obligations through the end of the year and some contracts for 2021 as well. But basically I told her like nothing else. I was like, I don't want to add anything to that. I want to spend so much more of my time like doing self-care and or studying and like working on pilot stuff and like working on brand stuff. So
I'm so excited for you. That's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, that's such a brave move. And that's so exciting. And that it takes taking that step to, to get to that. So now that we've kind of covered what you're up to now and what you're going to get into, what are your feelings today? Like, how does Gabi feel? Is there a blank there still? Is there one that lingers, that goes away, comes back?
That's such a good question. I don't know. I mean, I think there's something that will always be there. Like, I will say my entire life, I've just felt like I don't quite fit in. Right. And I think that's common, especially with biracial people, which I am, but it doesn't bother me as much anymore. So it's like, I have learned that in some way is a superpower, and it's kind of a good thing to it's like, I feel confident in myself and I feel assured in myself, but I never feel like other people.
Yeah.
But I no longer view that as a negative. Right. And so it's like, I never quite feel like I quite fit into any group, but I can get along with any group. That's kind of where, and I've always felt that way. I felt that way in middle school, even going into high school. Like, I would hang out mostly with the Black kids because that's where I felt the most comfortable. But I also had all of these white kids who knew me because I went there in 7th and 8th grade too, who would come to me and like ask me for advice, and I would kind of play liaison, which again, in retrospect, I feel like is problematic in its own right, because I don't feel like that's fair to me or to other Black kids who should also be included in those conversations. But I've always kind of felt like I can move through spaces and feel kind of comfortable anywhere, in a sense of like, but I don't quite fit in there. I don't know if that makes sense at all, but
that makes 110% to me, because as an Afro-Latina, I feel exactly the same way. I'm actually writing about this right now. And I think you're right. I think a lot of biracial or mixed, I think, for Afro-Latinxes like myself, who I'm Dominican, right? While I'm technically 100% Dominican, like what Dominican is essentially biracial. Like, I mean, our heritage is our ancestry is, European colonizers, African slaves, and Native Indians on the land. And so if you go into my DNA, I had my 23andMe through an Instagram collaboration.
Yes.
The results are that I am technically, or I guess genetically, biracial. But also living that experience of like never really feeling Black enough, not feeling Latin enough, definitely not feeling white. So I totally get it. And I think when you are mixed, there is a catch-22 of feeling like I'm kind of safe anywhere. Like, people could kind of like understand me wherever I go, but then they also don't know me at all, and I don't fit in anywhere. Like, it's just like this like double-edged sword.
Completely. And I feel that way about almost every group, right? So it's like, I can go and hang out with all of these thin, rich influencers, and I have accomplished the same amount as them, right? And I can hold conversations and it can be friendly and fine, but I don't feel like I'm fitting in. And then in other ways, like, I feel different kind of just in every sense in any group I'm in. I will say that I have definitely found community in the plus size world, and I have found friends that I love, but I just always feel in between. I don't know. I feel in between worlds at all times.
Yeah.
But again, for so long, I questioned that and felt like that wasn't good enough. And now it doesn't feel that way to me. And maybe that's just years of therapy talking, but I just feel like, okay, that's just a part of my identity, and that's cool.
Which I think when we come with, when we decide on a title for each episode, that blank is not necessarily seen as a negative. Sometimes it's your superpower. Like that feeling of, like you talked about, not feeling thin enough. It was you not feeling thin enough that gave you all your successes as far as being like a badass fashion designer and creating these lines for plus size people. And so it's just like, that is your superpower. Like sometimes whatever you don't feel enough of is what makes you be great at something.
Completely.
Yeah.
100% agree.
Cool. So what should we call the episode? Do you want to go now?
I think not thin enough definitely makes the most sense just because of what you just said, right? It's like kind of catapulted my career into what it's been because I didn't feel thin enough. And I was frustrated by that, but also by the lack of visibility and like attention from the mainstream fashion world. So I feel like that has been my legacy thus far.
Yeah.
Hopefully it won't be the only one, but that's where we're at right now.
You're about to write something great. And that's going to be your new legacy. I can't wait to read it. And if you ever need someone to read it, let me know.
Definitely. Now that I know that you live a block away.
I know, it's so weird. I'm like, hi, Gabi. I'm here.
It's so funny.
Well, thank you, Gabi. This was wonderful.
I know. This is awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for listening. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Until next time, know that you are more than enough. Check the show notes for links and info about today's guest. Follow us on Instagram at NotBlankEnoughPod. This episode was produced during the COVID-19 pandemic of 2020 and recorded remotely. Our show is executive produced by Grasie Mercedes and Dave Hill and produced by Douglas Sarine and Colleen Beasley. Not Blank Enough is a Gumption Pictures production.